Let's begin.
Hey there, scary story fanatics! Welcome back to Cleaving Thought from Bone with your host, Sociopathic. While some of you may be settling in for the weekend, others are headed out to work. The only thing worse than working a weekend is working the graveyard shift. It's a real killer. So, grab a cup of coffee and prepare to pull a double. It's time to get to work on another little tale that goes beyond the terrors of the night shift. The Lurching Fear.
A few months ago, I was tasked with working the graveyard shift, remodeling a local grocery store into modernization. I am an electrician by trade. Not to say that I don't know my way around most aspects of construction as a whole, but this field is not only where I shine, it's how I've made my living. As one would expect, not too many people jump at the chance to work third shift, especially construction. The hours are grueling, to say the least, and for those with families, it's not really all that easily fit into such a lifestyle. But for a single guy who loves the nightlife, I took my business rep up on the offer. Granted, I didn't really jump at the opportunity either, but 5 weeks of sitting on the bench, waiting for work, I was eager to get back out into the field, no matter what the hours. After all, bills wait for no one. Now, even though the hours are tough, and getting acclimated is quite a challenge, working third shift isn't without its perks. Firstly, typically guys either get paid more or get paid for 1 hour that is not worked. This means either an extra $1 an hour in pay in most circumstances, or having to pull a 7-hour shift at normal rate and getting paid for 8. This shift I had been assigned to happened to be 4 10-hour nights, meaning each night was a grueling 9 hours, but paying me for 10. The second perk about this shift is the fringe benefit of working in a less demanding context, or even by oneself. Meaning, no one is there to hound you every 2 seconds, yelling at you to get something done, etc. It's basically understood that third shift sucks, and project managers are usually happy that you just showed up. As for working, things do get done. How else could one stay awake all night long? If you're going to be there all night, you may as well stay busy. The night I walked onto the site, I was introduced to John. John happened to be the project manager, an older guy, soft-spoken, built like a brick shithouse, and observably knowledgeable. After proper introductions were in place, and an initial walkthrough of the job, John took me out behind the building and into the job Connex. Apparently, my Connex specifically. Usually tradespeople have to share a Connex with one another, mostly designated by trade and company, but considering I was the only electrician on board for the entire project, I was given a key to the Connex and informed that all materials needed would be in there. The only issue with this was that frequent walks out and around the building to gather materials not only wasted time, it was arduous due to the extreme cold of the season. So, after a few days, maybe a week, I was allotted permission to store the majority of materials in the stockroom, closer to the areas in which I would be working. A few more days after that, I had enough materials inside that I wouldn't have to open up that Connex for a month or so. And for a while, everything was like clockwork. Shift begins, work through the night, shift ends, repeat. But around that time, that's when strange things began happening. The first night it happened, I was working by myself. Sure, there were others in the building, as it was unsafe to be on the job site alone, but all others were busy completing tasks at one end of the store while I was working on the other end, behind the pharmacy layout, hidden from sight. I will say that I'm pretty sure that there was no one around, as I was about 12 feet in the air on a scissor lift, running conduit to a freezer unit, ignoring most of the surroundings below me. Hearing a strange, low sound, I looked down to find nothing. Scanning the area all around me, I saw more of the same. Shelves stocked with consumables, a vacant linoleum floor, the distant sounds of other crews working on the other end of the store, but nothing to suggest any one thing or person that could have made that sound. Well, scissor lifts creak and moan with motion, at least the more used of them do. So at first, I attributed the low groaning to the aberrant noises demonstrated by most equipment of this kind. That was it. Nothing more than an ambiguous sound that could be easily dismissed. The only other odd instance I noted that night was the weird markings in the lot, off to the side from where we parked our vehicles, near to the porta-johns. It looked like the strangest set of footprints or paw prints that I had ever seen. I'll do my best to describe them, but the lack of features and uncadenced placement and accurate analysis may elude me. The best way to describe them is large, round, hole-like prints, scattered about in clusters without any discernible meaning, yet either originating from or moving towards the woods from the portable toilets. Honestly, anything could have made these marks, and there was no way at the time that I could draw a linear connection. As the days progressed into about a week or more, I had forgotten about the incident altogether. And maybe the night shift had gotten to a good portion of the crew, or maybe that sum of manpower happened to have consecutive scheduled days off. I'm not one to pry, so who the hell knows. But the lack of people, both store worker and construction labor alike, was evident. However, for the majority of the week, I worked nearly side by side with those of other trades, all of us trying to satisfy a rush order for one of the store's departments, the butcher department, if my memory serves me right, and it usually does. But all of us being in the back corner section, most of the lighting and power had been cut to the rest of the store, the areas not currently under renovation. Only that back corner area stretching to and through the front entryway was illuminated. About halfway into a late Wednesday night into Thursday morning shift, John the Super asked me to repair a wall outlet in that front entryway. Apparently, some dipshit had crushed the box into the sheetrock with a scissor lift or something, and because it was the main entry point to what is otherwise a fully functional store during daylight hours, it had to be done immediately. Dropping whatever it was I was doing at the time, I grabbed the pouch tools and materials needed for the minor repair. It honestly was the drywall guy who had the biggest concern before morning, but still, I had to finish my tasks before he could begin, so I took a small pushcart with me and headed off alone towards the front of the store. It was dark, but not just nighttime dark, like not the moon or a single point of starlight in the sky. The kind of night that you can't see anything out a window unless right up against the glass. That's why her initial presence startled me. Jumping in place after hearing the sounds of steps coming through the front entrance door behind me, I calmed a bit upon spying what at first seemed like a perfectly normal, friendly, middle to older-aged woman. The store technically closed at 10 p.m. at that time, but up until then, and since renovation, the place is open 24/7. So, needless to say, this wasn't the first time a would-be customer had walked in the front door with the intention of making a purchase only to find a crew of construction personnel hard at work and nothing more. Hell, I've seen some people go as far as to grab a cart and go up and down the aisles gathering their groceries for the week, carts full, before one of us noticed them, the individual somehow not noticing that there is absolutely no one up front running registers or the customer's service desk, etc. I was about to inform the woman that the store was closed, but when I saw her face, I paused. The woman's face, frozen with terror and pale as a ghost, was enough of a sight to send a shudder of horror up my spine. That look of fear was so prominent that my mind automatically recoiled at being subjected to whatever sight she had been privy to. A moment passed before I was able to regain my composure, but as I did, the need to ask the woman if she was all right bubbled to the surface. Outside, I need... Ma'am, the store's actually closed right now, I explained to her, confused at her intentions at first. No, outside, in the parking lot, there, I saw... She started, and then paused. Seeming as if she was never going to speak again, I finally asked her what she saw. It just climbed up the wall. That response made no sense to me. There was no way anything was going to climb one of those walls, especially the wall out front. The first idea that came to mind is that maybe she had seen a burglar or other such home invader climbing into an upstairs window of one of the houses on the other side of the street across the lot. But then she elaborated. This woman wove me a description beyond all others. A creature with a twisty, mournful face, frozen in a desperate scream of despair, yet silent as the grave. A body like an insect, like a spider with 4 legs, but clad in seemingly normal clothes, down to the winter jacket. I mean, this woman's explanation was so descriptive, so vivid, that I felt I could practically envision this creature myself, climbing the storefront wall as she solidified. Draped in confusion, I walked side by side with her, out the automatic doors and into the lot, to investigate. Of course, we saw nothing, as she explained we would. The thing disappeared over the rim of the roof, but that was until we got closer to the wall, and the small mulch pit just before it. Look here! See? This is where it climbed up! She exclaimed, pointing to the mulch next to the wall. When I looked, I saw what she was trying to show me. 2 round, foot-like prints, and I instantly remembered the night a few weeks ago and the markings I had seen outside the portable laboratory. An instant rush of panic swelled through me, but the sensation passed as fleeting as it came, realizing that whatever it was, for all intents and purposes, was gone now, and that my supervisor would likely be wondering where I had wandered off to. I assured the lady all the way back to her car that I would keep a watchful eye and I would inform the store in the morning, which I was never going to do. Explaining to her that I needed to return to work, she finally climbed into her car and left. I did my best not to think about it, never even considered telling anyone what had happened. Hell, no one had even noticed I had disappeared for nearly 15 minutes, so no explanation needed. But still, I kept finding myself staring out that black, storefront glass window, out into the pitch of the quiet midnight hours, half anticipating the horrors I might discover lurking there, staring back at me, the other half of me terrified. I saw nothing the rest of that night, but the mental images I had created were still strong in my mind the following night, and when I finally saw it, a small part of me was amazed at how accurate my mental description had been. It was late in the night, or early morning, depending on how you would perceive it, and I was headed up into the pipes and ductwork above to run some wiring by the decking within the confines of the scissor lift. Temporary lighting had been strung, but more than enough dark spots were still present within such a large and cluttered space. Slowly ascending, my hard hat covered head passed the first of the pipes and approached the top lip of a large heating duct. That's when this thing lunged out at me with a shriek, reaching for me with its spindly arms that couldn't have been shorter than 4 feet long apiece. Jumping back in fright, away from the clutches of this thing, my left hand let off the lever, and with a sudden stop and subsequent bounce, I was nearly tossed from the basket. And still, my gaze never broke sight with that thing's grotesque face. Those sunken eyes, mouth stretched open with a scream, left open in silence, nose bulbous and crooked, and the overall shape of its face looked stretched long and somewhat twisted. As the bouncing came to a halt only a moment later, the thing retracted back into the darkness, beyond the lip of the duct, and out of sight. Needless to say, that was my last night of work there. From that point on, I refused to go up into the decking again, and refused to tell anyone why. I was told that if I refused to do the work, then to pack up my things, put materials away, and go home, that I wasn't needed. Placing my personal tools into their respective bags and buckets, I gathered up the materials that I had been using to once and for all bring them back to the Connex from which I had originally gotten them from weeks ago. Using the key that I had been given, I unlocked the latches and swung open the large metal doors. Well, one of them. And as soon as it opened, that's when I noticed the smell. I wasn't sure what it was at first, only that it smelled strong and terrible, like something rancid. This was because I had never really been around a dead body before, at least not one that wasn't embalmed and laid out in a coffin for a funeral. But once the police had come to investigate my discovery, I soon discovered that that's exactly what it was, and it's an odor that I'm sure I'll not soon forget. From what they could surmise from the way the body was laying, how it was huddled into a ball and adorned in street clothes and a winter jacket, how there were no wounds or signs of a struggle, that the woman had frozen to death. After some questioning, I was ruled out of any foul play, but the story of what had happened still makes my blood run cold to think about it. I shut the door with such a loud bang, the last bang she would ever really hear, along with the last sliver of any light, albeit moonlight. If I hadn't decided to take the materials inside, if I had only opted to utilize the Connex nightly, this woman would still be alive. How could I have known that a homeless woman would crawl in there with the intentions of making an inconspicuous home for the night? The terror she must have experienced when realizing that I would not be coming back, or that this particular style of Connex is practically soundproof. It was me who inadvertently ended that poor soul's life, and I will never forget that sorrowful and twisted expression frozen on her face.
Well, that just goes to show you, when you cut corners, you never know who's going to pay the price. But hey, as long as it's not you, right? Well, as long as your decisions don't come back to make you ante up too soon, make sure to stop by again next weekend. And until then, make sure to like, share, subscribe, and turn on notifications so I can trap you all again next Saturday.